let's talk about free speech. And I'm going to start with you, Joseph, on this. When does free speech become defamation? I ask this because there was the big case, a recent case, I guess, in the UK, or we talked about Wagatha Christie, as they call it, but Joey Barton and Jeremy Vine, a high court judge ruled that his comments that he made on social media were defamatory. He then ended up, Joey Barton had to pay an extra £35,000 to Jeremy Vine. Now, what is, and I've heard other commentators, for instance, say, you know, Keir Starmer was wrong to lock up, you know, the Tory councillor's wife because she said burn this, burn that, burn what have you, because it's free speech. Likewise, we also have Tommy Robinson, you know, talking about breaking defamation laws and what have you, and people always come back with it's free speech. So what are the lines in this, Joseph?
Okay, well, first of all, as it should go without saying, newsflash for anyone who thinks that free speech is an absolute. No, it's not. Free speech is protected in UK law, but definitely not absolute. Why is that? Okay, you can't start inciting riots, sedition, all that type of stuff, encouraging people to overthrow law and order. You can't say things that affect national security or the safety of people, and encouraging, you know, for anyone who says, what about free street when it comes to free speech, when you're tweeting stuff about burning down asylum centres, and there are people at that time outside those asylum centres who may as well have pitchforks saying burn them, you know. Well, that is an example. It's not just a tweet, because there's a direct relation to the things that are said even online and what has ended up happening. And how did those people know to assemble there? Because they were congregating on the internet, whipping each other up into a frenzy. The internet is real. If you can't see that, just get your head checked. All right. Now, there are also, of course, libel laws, right? So if you say something that kind of damages somebody's reputation or risks loss or damage to their business or trade, if those things aren't true, you could be found to have libeled them. It's no longer a criminal offence. In the 19th century, people went to prison for libel, but of course, because it's individuals usually libelled. In fact, most of the cases are civil proceedings that were brought in the High Court to save somebody's reputation. The great examples, wasn't there Oscar Wilde, whose affair with Bosie, his boyfriend, basically, that he denied it, and then so memorably in proceedings, basically admitted in his own libel proceedings that he brought, that he spoke of the love that dare not speak its name.
Yeah.
Now, the law says the person who made the statement that's libelous or disparaging or defamatory, they then have to show that statement, if they want to have a defence, was either substantially true, more or less true, which is why the newspapers often over-egg it a bit, because they know if they can mostly substantiate that what was going on, they won't be penalised for a bit of exaggeration. Don't go too far like the News of the World did with Max Mosley and start talking about Nazi prostitutes, because they weren't Nazi prostitutes, and he won on those points. But it's also, if you had an honestly held opinion, that kind of used to be called fair comment, or privileged statements. And that means, for example, if I'm a witness in legal proceedings, well, I'm protected in terms of being able to make my accusation without fear so that the proceedings can take place, because criminal proceedings, well, they're most important. Similarly, when people debating things in the Houses of Parliament, those types of things.
Yeah, I was going to say the Houses of Parliament. Let me come to you, Mark, because, I mean, never mind about what, Trump says about Kamala and what have you. I want to focus on Mel Gibson backing Donald Trump and insulting, saying that Kamala had the IQ of a fence post. But then let's go back, cast our minds back to his 2006 arrest with his anti-Semitic would Donald Trump or any politician, can they ever be sued for libel by, when you think of all the things that Trump said about Harris, or some people would say vice versa, or Mel Gibson weighing in? Is there a fine line?
No, well, let me. As Joseph said, there's free speech is not absolute, okay? But there's a case law called it's New York Times versus Sullivan, which says if you're a public figure, then you have to show that there was actual malice or reckless disregard of the truth in what you're saying about that person. In the case of Kamala Harris, there has to be actual malice or a reckless disregard of the truth about what she's saying. Now, is she going to sue Donald Trump or Mel Gibson because they claim that she's an idiot? No, that'll never happen. Or, go back to the Hillary Clinton days when Trump was saying she could be locked up for criminal offenses, which of course was ridiculous. But it is not. There is no such thing as absolute free speech. And, but a lot of times people don't bring cases, particularly when you're involved with a public figure, because those cases have a difficult threshold to meet. Now, let's use two other cases, if I might, where people were successful. One was a case where Rudy Giuliani made defamatory statements about election workers in Georgia. And they sued him and they got a recovery of several $100,000. And in fact, Rudy Giuliani right now was ordered by the U.S. bankruptcy court to sell his penthouse and other possessions in order to satisfy those judgments. And then another case that I personally was involved in, which was sort of a weird, not a weird case, but a difficult case. After 9/11, I was asked to represent a bunch of the real pilots in the United States who were training to fly airplanes for Saudi Arabian Air. The FBI then rounded them all up, or I should say they wanted to interview them, but they actually rounded them all up. They interviewed them. Well, while that happened, one of the pilots that I was physically with at the FBI, the CNN went into his house, took pictures off his wall, showed them on the air with his wife and him in a pool. And they said that he was a pilot of one of the planes that crashed into the World Trade Center. Now, could you imagine something that is more defamatory, particularly when the guy was not one of the pilots? He was physically sitting with me on September 12th. Well, guess what? I referred the matter to another lawyer against CNN, and CNN did first retract it, but it took a lot of time to get it. I had CNN retract it, but CNN ultimately paid, damages to this pilot. But going back to what Joseph said, there is no such thing as absolute speech. In a political setting, people say a lot of things about a lot of other people, and it rolls off people's backs, but it's not absolute.